Hello and welcome. I would like to thank all of you for joining us here today and welcome you to our Hot Topics webinar on an entrepreneurial approach to growing academic programs. Presenting today's webinar is Dr. Melissa Morriss-Olson, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at Bay Path University. My name is Jennifer Palma and I am an Assistant Director of Graduate Admissions at Bay Path University. Before I introduce you to Dr. Morriss-Olson, I'd like to take a minute and orient you to this online webinar environment. Just under our welcome message is the questions box. You'll see an empty box. You can type your questions here, click send, and we will be able to read these and respond to you at the end of the presentation. Not everyone on the webinar today is familiar with Bay Path, so I would like to give some background information. A Bay Path University education is known for empowering undergraduate women and graduate women and men to become leaders in their careers and communities with an innovative approach to learning that prepares students to flourish in a constantly changing world. Established in 1897, Bay Path has a long history of providing educational opportunities for both women and men throughout the United States and internationally, offering both on-campus and online programs at the graduate level for men and women and at the undergraduate level for women only. Accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, Bay Path University is a leader in education and offers a wide array of degrees that are focused on some of the most emergent careers, such as higher education, genetic counseling, mental health counseling, applied data science, occupational therapy, leadership and negotiation, cybersecurity, and many more. Our over 25 online and on-ground graduate programs are perfect for the professionals and the pragmatists, for women and men juggling families and full-time jobs. In fact, 90% of our students work and attend graduate school at the same time. You are able to do so because we make your education as accessible and manageable as possible. And if you ask a Bay Path woman undergraduate to define her academic experience, it would be one word: transformational. There is no other way to describe it. We have majors in neurobiology, cybersecurity, and business analytics, legal studies, and biotechnology. But we also educate the whole person, giving our women the courage and confidence to be their best self. It's why women's education still matters. And now I'd like to give you a little information about Dr. Melissa Morriss-Olson, Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Bay Path University. As Provost, Dr. Morriss-Olson has led the re-engineering of the learning community and structure, including the development of the thumbprint, Bay Path's distinguishing educational aspirations, as well as the Women Empowered as Learners and Leaders, the WELL program. Dr. Morriss-Olson has led the development and launch of many new graduate programs. She has also overseen the reshaping of undergraduate admissions and marketing, resulting in increased traditional undergraduate enrollment. A first-generation college student, Dr. Morriss-Olson obtained a PhD in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from Loyola University of Chicago in 1995. Her doctoral dissertation, which was designated by the Loyola faculty as completed with distinction, was later published as Successful Strategies for Christian Colleges and Universities, a leader's guide to managing in turbulent times. Her research interests include successful college management practices and women leaders in higher education. Developing the talents of women and girls is a personal passion of Dr. Morriss-Olson, who volunteers on behalf of organizations that share this concern. She has served on many nonprofit boards, including the Giving USA Foundation Board, and speaks frequently on philanthropy and women's issues. And now I would like to welcome Dr. Melissa Morriss-Olson.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. I am so excited to be here with you, and I look forward to sharing with you over the next several minutes some of the things that we have learned at BayPath about new program development. Now, for nearly all of us working within higher education and colleges, universities today, I think you will agree with me that these are interesting times, to say the least. The higher ed landscape is much more complex, it is more fluid, and it is more competitive than ever before. For those of you who are in the business of enrolling traditional undergraduate students, you probably know that there are 300,000 fewer high school seniors this year than last. And as the demographics go, that kind of drop is what we have to look forward to over the next several years. And for those in New England and in the Midwest, the drop is projected to be even more precipitous. The ability to be nimble and responsive to the marketplace is a critical attribute for institutional health and viability, and nowhere is this more true than in the way one manages the academic program mix, or as I like to call it, one's academic portfolio. So that's what this webinar is all about. I believe that there are opportunities that can be found in this challenging current context if one knows where to look and how to leverage these opportunities. My promise to you by the end of this webinar is that you will be introduced to a process for nurturing the development of new ideas, that you will understand how to evaluate and sustain good ideas. We will consider the most essential elements and considerations for developing new academic programs, and you will be exposed to a process template for operationalizing new program development. I want to start with this very important assumption, which is this: if you want to create a culture on your campus that is more entrepreneurial, where ideas are allowed to emerge and to stick, it's going to require attending to both the art and the science. Both sides here need to be on your radar, and both aspects, both the art and the science, each need a discipline around them if you're going to reap the full benefits in such a way that your campus will be transformed and that you will be able to develop and sustain a viable academic program mix that is responsive to the context in which you are situated. Academic entrepreneurship starts with idea generation. That makes sense, right? Without new ideas, there are no new program possibilities. I believe that every person, every individual on this webinar has the potential to generate new ideas, and you also have the potential to nurture an environment in which those with whom you work can nurture ideas. In higher ed, however, one of the barriers we face is that we spend so much time being inward focused, where we tend to be consumed with things that reinforce the status quo, and especially for academic leaders. We spend our days in meetings, troubleshooting problems, working our way through policies and stacks of minutia. So if new program development and generating and nurturing an entrepreneurial spirit is important to you, the first thing that I'm going to say is that you must build in time to nurture the discipline of becoming outward looking. So how do you do that? I love this quote by Albert Einstein: "I have no special talent, I am only passionately curious." Cultivating your own personal sense of curiosity, something that each of us was born with, but we begin to lose that innate sense of curiosity by the time we get to adulthood. So getting back in touch with that and cultivating in a very intentional way your own curiosity is one of the most important things that you can do to become more outward looking. Brian Glazer, the movie producer, author of a wonderful little book, The Curious Mind, attributes his success in the film industry to the power of curiosity, and he says it's something he has worked at his entire life. His perspective is that every conversation that he has with every individual that he meets on a daily basis is a curiosity conversation. And so, second, I want to suggest to you that every day you are in conversations that have the potential to generate game-changing ideas. But it requires that you remove the blocks that you may have in terms of your way of thinking. So what if you were to take one day and just assume this perspective as you go through the day? Glazer talks about the importance of leading with questions, with letting go of your opinions, your assumptions, and developing an expectation of something good is going to come out of every conversation that you have. Here at Bay Path, some of our best ideas for new program opportunities have actually come from these kinds of conversations. Our MS in Physician Assistant Studies program, one of our most successful graduate programs, actually originated out of a conversation that our president, Dr. Carol Leary, had with a local physician who stopped by her office to share some ideas. And out of that came this idea to start a PA program at Bay Path. I could go on in terms of other examples where that has been the case and has led to some of our programs. So new ideas are oftentimes waiting right in front of you to be found. Right in front of you are the clues, the patterns, the connections that give birth to new ideas. But you need to train yourself to look for these, and you need to put structure in place so that these ideas will come out of whatever process you have going. This image on the screen is actually an example from one of my colleagues at another institution, and she calls this her idea board. So she has all of her meetings in her office, and so whenever somebody is in a meeting in her office and they have a good idea, up it goes on a sticky note on this board. And what she has found over time is that people will look at these sticky notes and begin to make connections. And so she tells the story of many new program ideas that have emerged as there have been meetings in her office and people have begun putting sticky notes up on the board and then connecting the dots to other sticky notes that are already on the board. Just a simple but easy way that you can generate ideas and help your folks begin to connect the dots. Gut instinct is also very important, but I would suggest that its value comes after you've done your homework. In and of itself, gut instinct is not sufficient for bringing your best ideas to fruition, but if you've done your homework, then those hunches and instincts that you have can tap into the knowledge that you've gained as a result of the research and the due diligence that you've done. It's important also to institutionalize a process for bringing the outside in so that faculty and staff will be exposed to new ways of thinking on a regular basis. The easy way to do that is to circulate a report like the Horizon report. They just came out with their latest, the higher ed edition. A wonderful report you can download online for free that is full of great information about cutting-edge trends in higher education as it relates to technology, for example, technology in the curriculum. So taking a report like that and sending it around and asking people to give you their opinions is an easy way. Bringing in outside speakers, people who may bring a different perspective than what you typically find in the academy is another easy way to help people begin looking outward. Critical to bring non-academic people into existing processes, outside experts into internal committees and processes. Again, a great way to mix it up and to help bring the outside in and to place these folks side by side with your faculty and staff, particularly as they may be looking at new ideas or new ways of doing things. I love the quote by Pablo Picasso, learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. It is important to find ways to break the rules, especially as you're thinking about new program ideas. Many schools are recognizing innovation and new ways of doing things. Here at Bay Path, we have an award called the President's Award for Innovative Thinking, which reinforces in a very visible way that innovation and thinking in new ways is an important institutional value. Mixing it up. Spoke about this a couple slides ago. Kathy Davidson, Dr. Kathy Davidson, the author, higher ed innovator, talks a lot about the importance of mixing up people, especially when you are considering a new initiative or a new program. And so bring people in from the outside, bring people from other departments together so that you're getting a fresh and a new way of looking at whatever it is that you're working on. And again, this can be really, really helpful when you are on the front end of developing an academic program so that you don't get the insular perspective. Formalizing a process for idea creation. Again, one of my good colleagues at another institution actually puts innovation on the standing agenda for her provost staff meetings every week and circulates, rotates so that each person each time is responsible for bringing an innovative idea. Now, some of the ideas don't go anywhere, but what she's done by formalizing this process is placed it on the agenda and has communicated to everyone that this is a really important value here and we all need to be thinking in innovative ways even if the idea never comes to fruition. So what we've been talking about thus far has to do with the art side of new program development, things that you can do to create an environment where new ideas will be generated. And this is a really important thing to be thinking about in a very intentional way. But once you've generated an idea, then we turn to the question of how do you sustain it and how do you bring it to life. And this is where the science comes into play. The best ideas in the world will fall off the radar unless you have a process in place for evaluating, for vetting, and for bringing them to life. Now, it's especially challenging in an academic environment where we love to debate ideas. So in this second part of the seminar, I'm going to walk through the process that we've put in place at Bay Path, beginning with the key elements that we have found to be the most important to consider and that all new program proposals must address if they're going to be approved through our process here at Bay Path. Now, a heads up that if you would like to have a copy of our new academic program checklist, you can email us at the end of the seminar. We'll provide an email, and we are happy to send you a copy. The other thing I'm going to say is that I'm going to go through these very, very quickly because it's a lot of content. I understand that those of you on the webinar are at various points in your own understanding about academic program development, and so I'm going to pitch this kind of middle of the road, and then I will be available for questions on anything that you might want to know more about at the end of the webinar. So our program process, new program process, begins and ends with something that we call the P form. This is the document that gives life to the feasibility study and that must be completed as a very first step. Now, what you see here on the screen is our P form life cycle, and new programs can generate from any number of places here at Bay Path, but once generated, they have to go through the same process, which essentially involves approval at the departmental level, at the school level, at the provost cabinet level, and then if there are new resources required, then it also has to go to the Board of Trustees, to the Finance Committee, to the Academic Committee of the Board, and finally for approval by the entire Board of Trustees. That's the internal process, not to mention if it is a new program at the graduate level that we have no prior experience in, then it also has to go to the Board of Higher Education and to our regional accrediting body. When a new program is recommended, the sponsoring department or school conducts a feasibility study, and there are several required elements that the feasibility study must include. So I'm going to walk through all of those elements with a little bit of context for each one. The first has to do with the new program potentials fit with mission and strategy, especially in a resource-constrained environment. It is essential that a new program enhances and or extends the mission and the strategic priorities of the institution. Now, it's quite risky, in fact, to bring forward a new program that is a radical departure from anything you've ever done. It's going to be more expensive, it's going to take time to carve out a niche and to build a reputation. Now, there are exceptions to this. Obviously, if you're in a crisis situation, this may be your only option for survival, but as a general rule of thumb, you want to be able to connect a new program to your institutional DNA and strategy in some way. Here are the kinds of questions that we ask in terms of this first element, from what's the historical context for this type of program to how might this program advance our strategic program or priorities, how might it fit with the culture of our institution. If we pursue this, how will other programs be impacted? So as we consider new program ideas, we really have a dual focus. On one hand, how will this relate to our current mission? And secondly, how might it extend the mission? And both are really important to consider. So example, as a single gender, a women's focused institution, we're always on the lookout for programs that will strengthen and elevate our women's mission. So when we were considering our new MFA in creative nonfiction writing, and when we researched the competition, we found that there were no programs in the marketplace that focus exclusively on women as writers. And so we developed emphases in our program that we learned had special appeal to women writers, such as women as writers, the narrative essay, and so on. Spirituality, health, food and travel, writing women's stories. That's the kind of thing that we look at with new programs. Is this a program that might enhance in some ways our women's focus? The next element has to do with marketplace issues. Answering the why should we do this question is perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important question to get right. It relates to the first element, mission and strategy, for sure, but it goes well beyond that. Here are some of the key questions that we look at. Why does this program deserve to exist? What niche will it fill and for whom? Who else offers something like this? Could this be a signature program for us? Answering these questions requires digging deep to understand the potential market context for your new program. At minimum, it's important to gather data about the competition and to understand how your program might best be differentiated from existing programs. For every new program proposal, the feasibility study requires a program competitor analysis that includes the following information. At minimum, we always try to include similar programs within our region and beyond, depending upon how we think the program is going to be positioned. For Bay Path, that might mean starting with Western Mass, expanding to Boston to the east, Albany to the west, and Connecticut and Rhode Island to the south. For some programs, such as nonprofit management, the MFA, cybersecurity, we did a national competitor scan because there weren't very many programs, and we knew that we were going to be competing right from the very beginning on a national scale. This is where the art comes back into focus, because once you have your competitor data, you've filled out your competitor map the best that you can, it's really important to step back and try to connect the dots and to take your time looking at the map and trying to make sense of where the market gaps might be, and then asking the question, how could we fill a gap in the competitor scan that could really differentiate our program from what everybody else is doing out there. So it's important to take your time at this step. The next element addresses marketing and recruitment issues. In considering a new program, very important to get a sense up front about who the program will serve. This will also help you better assess what it's going to cost to market your program. For example, if you believe that your program is going to have a national market, it's going to cost you more, and you have to plan for that when you are developing your pro forma. On the other hand, if your program is going to be local and you already have a reputation and some visibility in that market, you may not need to spend as much. And with some of the health sciences, based on the competitive nature of the field, you may need to spend very little because there will be more students than you can possibly accommodate. So again, it's important to really understand who you're going to be serving or who you think you will be serving. These are some of the key questions that we ask in terms of this particular element. And you can get at this information through a competitive analysis. There's lots of different sources. I'm happy to come back and answer questions if you have specific questions in this regard. We do it in a number of ways. It might be a survey, it might be a focus group. For example, when we brought up our master's degree in nonprofit management, we pulled together all of the local nonprofit leaders and asked them to tell us what was needed in the region and who they thought might be a typical student. And then we built our program and our marketing around the good information that they gave us. Also important to consider the occupational outlook for jobs and for careers that are related to the program that you are considering. One of the easiest places to look, although it's not a perfect source, but one of the easiest is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Occupation and Industry Projections, and I've given you the website address up here. This is my most favorite resource for an initial check on future demand, especially in the health science areas. As I said, though, it's not perfect data. There are companies out there that you can actually hire, such as Burning Glass, Gray and Associates, and some others that do a really, really good job of going deep in terms of understanding occupational demand among other kinds of marketplace issues. So if you have some funding to throw at this, I would recommend that you spend it on some of the more sophisticated data that you can get your hands on these days and go as deep as you can. So you make sure you understand the marketplace for your area, your region in particular. Here you can see the job demand projections. This comes from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development. You can get to this through the Bureau of Labor Statistics website that I just had on the previous screen. What's really cool about this, though, is that you can search by education level as well as state. So let's say you want to know what the fastest growing occupations are for those who have at least a master's degree within your particular state, and then it'll pull it up in terms of employment currently as well as projected 10 years forward. And this is just an example of what you get. You get 50, the top 50, and the first 25 you can see here. This is the kind of data that eventually led us to launch a graduate program in genetic counseling. And you can see here there are small numbers, but only 2 programs. So 160 currently employed as genetic counselors, projected to go up only by 20 in the state of Massachusetts, but there are only 2 programs in the state of Massachusetts at current, graduating fewer than 20 students annually. And so there's lots and lots of room in the market. So that was one of the things that we looked at in making that decision. The next element requires thinking through how the program is going to be operationalized. This is a really important step. It involves preparing a detailed description of your program and also ensures a reality check before your proposal gets too far along in the process. These are some of the key questions that must be addressed in terms of the feasibility study, and you can see that it requires going pretty deep in terms of how the curriculum will be structured, any external accrediting requirements, learning outcomes, educational philosophy. The reason this is so important is that it ensures that whoever is bringing the program forward, they're going to understand what it's going to take in terms of the curricular part of this before they get too far down the pike. And this is the point at which some departments have actually stopped their development or they've changed course, because once they started to try to answer these questions, they realized that the program wasn't going to serve the purpose that they had initially hoped that it might. So this element, resources, addresses what it's going to take to launch and to sustain the program. And again, I'm going to be very basic in my comments here, assuming a wide range of financial understanding on the part of those of you who've joined us today. and I'm happy to answer questions at the end if you want me to go deeper. At BayPath, we require a 4-year financial pro forma with every new program proposal, and that is a pro forma that's developed jointly by the Dean, the Chief Financial Officer, and me as Provost. Through this pro forma, we invariably will surface financial assumptions, operational plans, or outcomes that, when checked more thoroughly, may prove to be unworkable. For example, when we first developed our MFA in creative nonfiction writing, we had taken a very, very creative approach to structuring the curriculum, but when we actually began to cost it out using the pro forma elements, we realized pretty quickly that it was not financially viable as we had structured it, and so we had to make some major changes. The financial pro forma serves many useful purposes, the most important of which is estimating the program's net financial contribution and impact. If the pro forma is sufficiently robust, it will enable you to think systematically about what is going to be required, short-term and long-term, to ensure the program's success. The pro forma also helps you proactively think through variables such as pricing and marketing expenses to consider how much risk you're willing to assume for factors that are often outside of your control due to the competitive context in which your program resides. By way of resource considerations, these are just some of the things that we require to be addressed. So, for example, staffing, how many for this program? What are the qualifications? How tough is it going to be to get them? So, for example, we know that in some health science areas it is very, very difficult to get faculty. And so we know we're going to have to pay more. We have to consider that on the front end and build that assumption into the pro forma. Physical space, are we going to have to build out new space, and if so, what's it going to cost? Or will we run this program online, which has very few physical space demands? And so on and so on. It's important to check the accreditation requirements for staffing and also for salary ranges, if there are ranges that are recommended, if you're bringing up a program that has external accreditation requirements of any kind. So then, turning to the revenue projections, these are some of the things that we require be addressed. What's the right tuition price point? How many required credits, additional expenses needing to be offset, how will the curriculum flow, anticipated net contribution. The extent of the net contribution expected by a new program and the timeline for meeting financial projections is determined at BayPath by considering the program's importance to institutional mission and projected long-term financial equilibrium. So, for example, we may be willing to assume a greater upfront resource investment and a longer break-even timeline for a program that we can see will contribute more significantly over time. Or we may be willing to consider a more modest and perhaps even a break-even net contribution for a program that contributes to our mission in a significant way. So, bottom line, however, especially for our graduate programs, each program needs to be able to support itself at a break-even kind of position, meaning its revenue contributions must offset and ideally outpace the expenses required for operation while also contributing resources back to the institution. A second important principle for new program pro formas includes the time frame, and from my experience, a minimum of 3 years is necessary for capturing the full range of variables that could potentially impact the program's financial potential. We use 4 years. I think 4 years is great, 3 years at minimum. So there are 4 primary components that comprise our pro forma, and I'm going to address each one separately, starting with Chart A that you see on the screen, which addresses enrollment and pricing assumptions. The tuition pricing is shown here as a per credit rate, and we determine this based on that competitor analysis that I showed you a few slides ago. So critical information piece is to find out what other institutions, especially those that you're going to compete with, what are they charging, and then make sure you charge at an appropriate rate. Now, if there's no competition for your program, you can go a little higher. However, if it's a crowded marketplace, we always like to enter that market with a new program under the median, if possible, so that we can start out very competitively in terms of pricing. Once our program is launched, we review our tuition against the competition annually to make sure the pricing is still appropriate. What we've learned is that the market, for just about all programs, the market can change on a dime, especially as other new programs come online. It can very quickly be impacted if a new program enters the market at a lower price point. And so you really have to monitor this annually and keep your eye on what other institutions are charging. Total credit hours is a calculation that sums the total credits projected to be taken by each student in a given year. And this chart illustrates the template that we use to project student enrollment per term and the total student credit hours. You get the total student credit hours here by multiplying the number of credits for each course by the projected headcount enrollment and then summing the totals for all terms. So you can see here 528 for is the total for FY18, 210 was the total at the top for FY 2016-2017. This is a really helpful exercise to map out every course that's going to run and then to plug in the credits, what you think the enrollment will be, and also who's going to teach it. Is it going to be a full-time faculty member, or are you going to use an adjunct? And if an adjunct, what are you going to pay the adjunct? So you really can get your hands around the course enrollment flow and then how that translates into potential revenue. Revenue assumptions then are obtained by calculating the gross tuition revenue for each year of the pro forma. That comes from the previous screen. Again, you can see by going down to the bottom, you can see the potential gross revenue, which then gets plugged in for each year. Other potential sources of revenue would be included here as well, such as any income generated from student fees that might be specific to this program. If there are non-credit offerings or other activities of the program, you'll see that for this particular program, our revenue assumption for the first year of operation was $166,950, and then it goes up from there. This chart, Chart D, illustrates the expenses which must be captured in the pro forma. The most significant expense has to do with compensation and benefits, includes the faculty, part-time, and adjunct costs by term and year, in addition to any other required staffing. Chart B, which I showed you 2 charts ago, showed our method for projecting faculty staffing needs and costs on a term-by-term basis. And then again, you roll it up and you can plug it in here to the expense assumption part of the pro forma. In the case of programs that carry external professional accreditation, very important to know and factor in the accrediting agency's minimum staffing requirements, and these are commonly tied to program enrollment and need to be adjusted accordingly. So you need to make sure you have that on the radar when you're developing the pro forma. In other words, as your enrollment grows, for some accrediting bodies, you have to actually increase the number of full-time faculty or staff in particular areas. Now, we assess a 10% overhead charge for each new revenue-producing program, typically beginning in year 2, so you can see that reflected here on the pro forma. This allows us to account for the institutional infrastructure costs that are incurred as enrollment grow, but can be difficult to isolate. These funds are pooled and then used to fund new hires in support areas such as IT, the library, or to pay for items that are needed to strengthen the institution's capacity to support more students. Marketing costs are determined according to the program's competitive context and geographic reach. For example, we will project higher marketing costs for a new program that will be offered entirely online and for which the reach is national or international versus an on-campus program that has a local reach. And finally, it's important to consider whether the program will incur any capital expenditures, that is, such as a build-out of existing space or equipment, as well as whether there are accrediting or other regulatory costs associated with the program. This chart ties all the elements together with an estimate for the program's net cash flow, and you get to this by subtracting the total expense, which came from chart D, from the total revenue, which came from chart C, and then subtracting any capital expenses if there are any. Unless there are compelling extenuating circumstances, we always aim for a positive net cash flow for all new programs by year 2. We also calculate the operating margin for each new program. We aim for a margin of at least 25% by year 2. The operating margin is calculated by dividing the total revenue into the surplus or the deficit, whatever the case might be. You can see here we're projecting by year 2 a 34% operating margin, which is really healthy, and in fact we did exceed that for this particular program. For our context, a program that is able to sustain an operating margin of at least 50% by year 4 is considered to be a strong net financial contributor. Here you see the entire pro forma all rolled up into one, and in fact what we present to the Finance Committee is one single piece of paper that has all of these elements on it. Okay, so once your data are collected, once you've mapped out and considered all of these key elements, then it's helpful to step back and consider both the risk and the opportunity presented by this new program that you're considering. So I'm going to quickly walk through the key decision factors that we consider in making a final decision about moving forward with a new program. And again, it goes back to mission as a first consideration. With limited resources, it's always important to consider what you are proposing in light of mission. What impact will this new program have on mission? Will this program limit or enhance our mission impact, and in what way? And what will happen if we do not do this? Two things to keep in mind. You want to avoid mission creep, which has to do with diverting precious resources to efforts that detract from your mission, but you also want to avoid mission insularity, which means being so narrowly focused in your mission that you miss some really good opportunities that may be right in front of you. Equally important are the questions that help us assess whether we have the operational capacity to undertake this new effort and do it well. These are some great questions that we always ask before we make a decision. In brief, what's it going to take to be successful? How long is it going to take? And what's it going to cost? What existing institutional resources might we draw upon to do this? For example, the MS in Genetic Counseling is built partially on existing coursework that we were already offering in our Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And so that helped us feel a little bit more confident that we could do this new program without too big an expenditure. So finding ways to tap into existing resources is a very important consideration, and that's where the pro forma can be very, very helpful in figuring out the what it will take question, as well as understanding the profit margin that you're going to need in order for this program to be successful. A third criteria has to do with assessing whether we can develop a market niche in a particular idea. You may have a fabulous idea, but it may not have a market, or there may not be a niche that you can occupy. And if that's the case, then you probably don't want to move forward. So understanding, can we establish a niche in this area? Does it make sense for us? And is it attainable, or are we just dreaming pie in the sky? So for example, when we developed our American Women's College, we did it in part to address our declining on-campus enrollment in our one-day-a-week Saturday program for adult women. We had developed a niche in educating adult women, and so the creation of the American Women's College online enabled us to expand this niche by providing a lower-cost, totally online women's-only option within an area where we had developed a reputation and some expertise. Now, quite honestly, many of our new program ideas have emerged initially as a gut instinct. That goes back to the art. But because the market niche questions are an important element in the feasibility study, we have a process, that is the science, in place to ensure that our gut instincts are well vetted and that we avoid an over-reliance on the "if we build it, they will come" trap. Considering new program possibilities, I always try to gauge the initial level of internal support as early in the process as possible. Key questions: do we have an effective champion for this? What role will this champion play going forward, and are there benefits or limitations associated with this champion? And in the academic environment, it's really, really important to understand if you have a champion, if you have an existing faculty member who's advocating for something, important to understand, will they be a positive force for bringing this program forward and helping it to be successful. For example, the success of our recently launched fully online master's degree in accounting is due in no small measure to the fact that this program was developed and launched by our chair of the undergraduate accounting program, an individual who has tremendous respect among her colleagues and extensive professional contacts and networks within our region. A fifth consideration involves assessing the potential for failure against the potential for success, thinking through what could go wrong, how likely is it that this could happen. If that happens, what's the impact, and how much failure can we tolerate and for how long. So at the same time, we try to assess the potential demand for the program, as well as what broader opportunities this program might provide for the institution. While not a perfect science, having both the opportunity and the potential for failure on the radar at the same time contributes to better decision making and reduces the potential for myopic thinking. We also map out where we think a new program might fall in terms of its market demand enrollment versus the cost to run the program. We map all of our programs at the graduate level and have a general sense of how many we need in each of these boxes. Obviously, you want to have fewer programs in the lower right-hand quadrant, the low demand, high cost, and have as many as possible in the upper left-hand quadrant, high demand, low cost. But net, I really encourage you to begin thinking about all your programs as a portfolio of programs and understanding where they currently fit in terms of these different issues. And then as you look at new programs that you might be bringing on board, you want to be sure that you have a good balance and that you're not adding too many programs in the low demand, high cost box. Likewise, we also map programs in terms of quality and demand so that we can do an initial projection of where a new program might fit and whether we can afford to add a new program to a particular category. Happy to come back and answer more questions if you have it in terms of how we look at quality. Demand, that has to do with enrollment, is probably the most important measure there. And then here's an example from another institution, not BayPath, of programs that they have mapped on the quality and the demand grid with revenue added in as a third layer. For long-term financial viability, it's really critical to have the right balance here of programs. Again, so thinking about your programs as a portfolio and how you can best balance revenue, cost, and quality in terms of all your programs so that as you're plugging in new programs, you're keenly aware of where they're going to fit in terms of these important criteria, and you know on the front end that you can afford to add a program for missional reasons that may not have a high demand, but you may be doing it for other reasons. Okay, so once the program is approved and ready to launch, we then turn our attention to operationalizing the new program. And at BayPath, we start small, we invest conservatively on the front end, try for a minimum break-even point, as I said, by year 2. And our board wants to see break-even, if at all possible, within 1 year and running, unless the long-term potential suggests the prudence of a longer upfront period, such as when we brought up our physician assistant studies program. We knew that it was going to take a bigger investment, but that once it was up and running, there would be a good return on that investment. Need to watch the indicators carefully and change course quickly. We have at times brought up programs where the assumptions that we made were not correct in terms of the market, and so watching how that program is doing from a number of perspectives right as you're launching it is really critical, and then being able to adapt and be responsive so that you don't let the program go too far if you do need to make some changes. The one thing I would say here is when you're bringing up a new program, you can never capture all the variables on the front end. You will make incorrect judgments, and that's why it's so important to stay adaptive and be responsive so that you can quickly flex if you need to. I want to return here to the art side of things. Maintaining a spirit of adaptability once a program is up and running is a very difficult thing to do, because once that program is up and running, it gets really sucked up into the infrastructure of the institution. And by their very nature, our colleges and universities are difficult for change. And so these are just some of the factors that have been noted in terms of why change is difficult and why it's so difficult to adapt. And I'm sure as you're looking at these, you can think of many examples from your own institution that bring these factors to life. So if you are responsible for new program development, the one thing I would say is that it takes real courage and backbone on your part to make sure that you are doing everything possible to nurture an innovative kind of spirit so that those new programs can have the time they need to thrive and to be successful. Because more often than not, you won't get everything right on the first time out, and you will need to flex and adapt as you go. Once we see early signs of success, we tend to ramp up the investment. We tend to build as we go while continuing to review and to adapt. It's not for the faint of heart. It really requires staying very closely in tune to what happens with each new program once they're up and running. So in wrapping things up here, I just want to end by addressing this notion of scaling and managing capacity. As I said, at BAPAP, we start small, we manage for capacity, something that can be a moving target, and then we scale. So a few things that are important here. As programs are launched, as I said, they very quickly are usurped into the bureaucracy of the institution and prevailing notions about the way things should be. But scaling your program successfully requires a vigilance in challenging this and continuing to ask very important questions. I'm a fan of the Japanese-inspired philosophy called Kaizen, and there's a saying about having Kaizen eyes when you are innovating or bringing up anything that's new or that is different in an organizational context. If you are interested in learning more about this, I have the website here. Tom Curtis has a blog and some great information online. He's been speaking, writing about this for a very long time. But the whole idea here is that you can develop some practices that are very intentional, that are easy to do, that will ensure that you and those with whom you are working develop this Kaizen eyesight. So asking and using the 5 whys, for example, making sure that you continue to challenge and ask questions about why are we doing it this way? Why is this happening? And pushing and pushing until you get the answers. The market can change quickly on a dime, and if you're not paying attention to the program's marketplace context, your program can very quickly become irrelevant. Start small with investments. For new grad programs, we typically start with 1 full-time director and a cadre of adjuncts unless the program has external accrediting requirements, and then of course we meet whatever is required by the accrediting agency. In considering investments, ask yourself whether this investment might have a broader and a longer serving purpose. So for example, at BAPAP, when we brought up our first online graduate program, we established a Center for Digital and Online Learning because we knew that we were going to be bringing up several additional graduate programs and that this center would pay for itself very quickly. Likewise, we have just built a brand new health sciences building to house our graduate programs in education, health, and human sciences, and we're going to be bringing up several new additional graduate programs in that area, so that building will pay for itself very quickly. So as you're looking at investments related to new programs, be sure you ask yourself, is this something that could have a broader and a longer serving purpose? Every college, every university represented on this webinar has untapped potential and capacity. Again, as you're looking at a new program, think about, is there a way to build this off of existing curricula? Many of our graduate programs are now running online, and the online version of the program was built directly from the on-ground program. So again, do you have on-campus programs that you could easily convert to run as online programs to capture a bigger market? You might have bachelor's degree programs out of which you could perhaps create some associate degree programs. There is a reverse trend phenomenon taking place in the United States right now where associate degrees have become popular. And so just by taking some of your lower level curricula and bundling it as an associate's degree, again, you might be able to capture a new market. So think about, how can you utilize what you already have to do things in new and different ways, your existing mission to express it in new ways. So I'm going to end here. At the end of the day, I liken the process of academic entrepreneurship to that of a dance, a process that is highly fluid, requiring one to be at the same time both disciplined and focused while remaining flexible and responsive to the context in which one is moving. This is the art and science approach that has been pivotal to our success at BayPath and is essential, I believe, for navigating the dynamic higher education landscape that most of us find ourselves in today. So again, if you are interested in learning more, I'm going to stay online and I'm happy to answer questions in just a moment. You can email us to receive a copy of our new academic program checklist, which gives you all of this and more. Again, it's been my pleasure to be with you today, and I am going to turn it over to Dr. Lauren Way, who's going to just offer some closing comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morriss-Olson. And again, everyone, please know that Dr. Morriss-Olson will take questions from the audience in just a moment. You can start typing them in if you'd like in the questions box, and we will be able to see them and address them in a moment. I am Dr. Lauren Way, the Program Director of the Master of Science in Higher Education Administration program. In fact, one of the first programs that Dr. Morriss-Olson launched here at BayPath was 10 or 11 years ago. Our Master of Science in Higher Education Administration gives students the option of selecting one of 4 concentrations in their area of interest: Enrollment Management, General Administration, Institutional Advancement, and Online Teaching and Program Administration. The degree is completed entirely online with no residency requirement. Each concentration has a total of 12 courses, or 36 credits. Students are required to take 8 core courses within their concentration and 4 electives. Electives are chosen from many different courses within Higher Education Administration program, or even from other graduate programs here at BayPath University. Students are encouraged to work with their faculty advisor to discuss election options, to customize and tailor their degree to fit their specific interests and objectives. Most students finish the degree in 1 to 2 years. In the program, we focus on highly relevant course content, carefully considering current trends and leading-edge practices. Students often tell us that they're able to immediately apply what they've learned in class to a situation in their current job or work environment. Faculty in the program are experts in their field. Many are currently working in executive leadership positions within institutions around the country. All hold doctoral degrees and are teaching practitioners. They're able to draw on their many years of experience in higher education and bring a wealth of knowledge to the online classroom. In short, the entire curriculum prepares you to lead, manage, and innovate in the rapidly changing world of higher education administration. On this next slide, we have the Ruffalo Noel Levitt Certificate in Enrollment Management. BayPath has partnered with Ruffalo Noel Levitt, a premier enrollment management firm, for the Certificate in Enrollment Management. This 6-course series is a BayPath University curriculum with certification from Ruffalo Noel Levitt. On this slide, you can see that each of the 6 courses in the certificate program addresses key competencies in enrollment management. They include enrollment management principles and practices, higher education marketing and communications, financial assistance in higher education, technology applications to enrollment management, retention in higher education, strategic planning for enrollment management. The certificate can be taken alone or in combination with the full degree with no additional courses. If you have additional questions about our programs, we do encourage you to check out our website or contact us with your questions, and we'll be happy to assist you. One more slide before I return you back to Dr. Morriss-Olson for questions. On this slide, you'll see some of our upcoming webinars and hot topics in higher education administration. So if you loved today's presentation as much as I did, we do encourage you to come back for future webinars in higher education. And as you can see on the slide, there's an exciting series of topics and speakers. And so this will conclude our presentation, and now we would be delighted to take your questions. Dr. Morriss-Olson is still here, as well as Jennifer and myself. Please feel free to type them in, any questions you have, into the box now so we can read them and respond. Okay, we see quite a few questions in here. We're just trying to pull them up. One of the questions for Dr. Morriss-Olson is there a formula for projected new enrollment?
You know, that is a great question, and it depends. We don't have a formula for enrollment per se, but the enrollment, whatever we are projecting, has to work in terms of all of those other elements that go into the pro forma. So, for example, maybe the expenses are not that significant so that we can start with a lower enrollment projection, but it all has to wrap up in terms of the bottom line for the program working at a break-even place at minimum. You know, in terms of, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, how do we even know what to project? And that's where getting data, and some of these companies that I mentioned can actually go pretty deep in terms of giving you data on all the competitors in your region and what the current enrollments are. And then if you pair that with the occupational outlook data, you can get pretty close to making a good guess about how much enrollment you ought to be able to generate. And so that's what I always suggest is go conservative. We always are conservative on the front end. We project in the financial pro forma fewer students than we think will actually enroll, because it's always great to meet and exceed that projection. But then look at all those other factors too. So if this is going to be a program that has to have a lot of faculty from the very beginning, if there are a lot of expenses, then you're going to need to project higher enrollment. And then one of your questions is that attainable? Do you really have a realistic picture on what you can do? And if not, if you don't think it's attainable, with the enrollment that you have to make it work financially, then you probably shouldn't be offering the program.
Thank you. The next question on the screen is about the feasibility study. If you'd be able to circle back and talk just a little bit more about that slide with the essential elements.
Okay, I'm not sure which essential elements. There are several essential elements that make up the feasibility study. And in fact, if you would like me to send you a copy of the feasibility study that we use with the template, I'm happy to do that. The new academic program checklist document that we're going to send out actually has all of those elements on it. So maybe you can clarify which of the elements you want more information about.
I think this is the slide the question was in reference to, with regard to how to determine answers to some of these questions. I think that's what was being asked. The slide
Okay,
is on the
yeah,
screen.
no, this is, and again, there are a variety of ways that you can do this. For example, focus groups. As I said, when we brought up our Master of Science in Nonprofit Management, we did focus groups with leaders of nonprofit organizations in the area, and they helped us figure out who might be most interested in the program. You can do a survey of prospective employers. So, for example, we're thinking about bringing up a doctorate in higher education. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is sending out a survey to current sitting presidents and provosts at institutions across the country to try to get at what kind of a program might best meet their needs and who would be most likely to enroll in it. And so, you know, there's a number of things you can do. Those are easy things that we have found. You can also hire somebody to conduct research for you. But again, it depends on the competition and who else is offering the program and what you think your niche might be. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Melissa. I see one more question on the screen. I think this one is for us. What time of year can I start the Higher Education Administration program? Which is a great question. There's actually 3 times of year that we have starting dates. We have a starting date in the fall, which is around mid-late October. Students also can begin the program in the spring, which is the end of February or early March. And the 3rd time of year is in the summer, which is usually the end of June. They can start the program as well. So there are 3 start dates throughout the year. It really depends on which program, which concentration you're in, and when you start, and how fast you plan to progress at a 1-year or 2-year pace, etc. But typically the programs can be done in 1 to 2 years, and they are entirely online without residency. So that was a great question. Thank you. And Jennifer would love to speak with you if you have an interest in exploring those options, and I'd be happy as the program director to tell you more about the curriculum if you wanted to contact me. Let's see. Do we have more questions? I think right now we are at the end of our questions. If anyone has any questions, just type them into the box. Others can't see them, but we can see them on our end, and we can read them out loud for Dr. Morriss-Olson. We'll just give it another moment in case anyone has any more questions. Well, there don't appear to be more questions, although there are a number of wonderful comments that I don't believe Dr. Morriss-Olson can see on the screen. Exceptional, thank you. Let's see. Thank you so much. This is very helpful for what we're doing right now within our institution. And then a few questions about whether the PowerPoint slides will be shared with those on the call. And I believe that the answer is yes. And we are recording as well. So the entire recording of the presentation will be available on the website. So so that's the answer to those questions. I think what we'll do now is just go ahead and wrap up the day. We realize that we have gone over the time. We hope this was as stimulating and interesting for you as it was for us here in the Enrollment Management Office. Dr. Morriss-Olson, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. This was actually a very exciting presentation.
Thank you. And again, thank you to everybody who was on the webinar. And again, if you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out and to let us know.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.